Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. With host and founder, Richard Case, and co-host and retreat leader, Kathy Ricconi. Jesus reminds us to watch for the signs of his return. Today, we will explore further what we are seeing in our times that line up with what signs he said would indicate the potential of the end and his return. We will also discuss the practical meaning of this as we watch and as a remnant prepare as he so leads. And now your host, Richard Case.
Welcome everybody to End Times Friday, and this is part two with our good friends Eric and Rabbi Ephraim from Israel. Last week, if you didn't listen to last week, I'd go back because we had a great discussion of, well, what's it like living in this war? It's now about 5 weeks. They described all these different conditions, and you know, the best condition is you have a bomb shelter in your apartment or home, and then in your apartment building, then down the street, and etc. No schools. So we have a couple questions about that, and maybe Rabbi, you could start since you have kids. Is how often, let's say now weeks 4 and 5, do you have to go to a bomb shelter every day? And then what are you doing with your children that can't go to school?
Yeah, so I have one kid who's like trying to get in the door here so he can listen to this. So that's one thing that we do with the kids when they're not in school.
Yeah, have them come in. We'd like to introduce him. Who is that?
This is Noah.
Hey, Noah.
Hey.
And so
let me ask you a question, Noah. Do you like not being in school?
Yeah, I prefer it,
Okay.
but it's a little boring.
it's getting a little boring now. So the bottom of the totem pole of all the, the hierarchy of suffering that people do, the bottom is if you live in the center of the country, which is probably, a majority of the country lives in the Tel Aviv, Herzliya area. So they get, anywhere from 4 to 10 missile attacks a day. And so if you are in that area and don't have a safe room in your apartment and you have children, so you basically have to keep your kids who are not in school entertained all day long. You're probably not going to work because you need to entertain your kids, and you're also going out of your mind without going to work and trying to keep them busy. And then 4 to 10 times a day, you're running them down, not sleeping at night because you're getting up a couple times at night to run them down. And of course, you might live 10 floors up in an apartment building. So those people are really, really having a hard time of it. And I know a lot of people in that position. And I should say, despite that, it's really amazing that the vast, vast majority of the country is totally behind the war, even though Israelis generally love to disagree very passionately on everything. But the possibility that we have to seriously, damage the ability of Iran to stop their attempt at genocide against us, which they've been working on for 30, 40 years and put billions of dollars into it. So the fact that we have this opportunity finally to eliminate that threat, or at least downgrade that threat, that people are willing to put up with a huge amount of personal discomfort. And again, times 10 million people are going through this on a daily basis and a nightly basis. And despite that, we're pretty unified that we want this to get finished right.
Do the, obviously you have your typical, and Eric explained, you have a typical political divides, including, what we call over here the Trump derangement syndrome. And it sounds like you have something similar with Netanyahu, but yet you said there's unity. Do the Jews, even today, even though they're getting weary of it, and loss of sleep, makes you really worry, they would like to just keep prosecuting the war until something really is resolved, as opposed to, well, let's just try to do a ceasefire and stop this for this, because that's what Americans would typically do, is say, why don't we just stop this for a while, because we're tired of it.
Right. Yeah, no, so I would, the vast majority of people, I think it's something like 80% or something, according to surveys, want to finish this war as it needs to be finished and not We've gone too many times where we have wars, a lot of our people die, and then we stop before they finish the job. And that means that our enemies have a chance to rebuild. Maybe they get knocked back a few years or something like that. Our enemies have a chance to rebuild. And then we're back at war a few years later, plus nonstop terrorism in between. So we're hoping that it might be better, might be a change this time because, we haven't gone directly against Iran in such a serious way ever. We did in June, but not as serious and not with the assistance of the United States. So we're hoping to be able to finish and
Yeah, I think I have a comment to make on top of what Ephraim just said, and that is there is, I wouldn't put it in the same classification as the divides you see in the United States, but there's a reasonable segment of the population that dislikes this current government immensely, particularly the prime minister. And then there's another segment of the population that's extremely supportive of this government. But regardless of which side of that spectrum you're on, or if you're in the middle, the vast majority, I'm talking 90+% of especially the Jewish population, puts in a tremendous amount of trust in the Israeli Defense Forces and the decisions that get made, and the intelligence community, both what the Mossad recommends as well as the IDF intelligence community. And when they tell the population that, we've accomplished 2/3 of the goals we had set for this war in terms of our targets in Iran, then people simply say, okay, that means another 2 to 3 more weeks of this, and then we'll accomplish what the Army thought we needed to accomplish, and hopefully by that time it'll be over, but maybe not, and people go on. So there's a tremendous. Obviously on October 7th there was a tremendous breakdown in trust of the Army because of what happened.
Yeah.
But it's great. I think it's done a great job regaining the trust of the population. So when they say that they've done this, people tend to believe them when the Army says it.
With the limitations, what has happened to your economy?
Good question. The high-tech community, which is a bulk, a large part of our exports. There are, I would say, 3 large segments of exports, maybe a fourth. Okay, one is the high-tech community, where we have either divisions of American companies. I think Apple has like 3,000 employees here. Amazon has a couple thousand. Microsoft must have 4,000 or 5,000 employees here, and they have serious operations here. I think most of the integrated circuits that go into your iPhone or your iPad or your Mac computer are designed here in Israel, for example. So that community, a lot of that work can get done from home, and they're doing still quite well. Startups are still popping up left and right. The main problem there is that a large part of that population serve in, we call it miluim here in Israel. That means reserve duty. And so a reasonable fraction of those engineers or those, marketing people are now wearing uniform and standing in Lebanon with a machine gun. So that has an impact on the economy. The second segment of our exports are agriculture. And I think my guess is a lot of the exports of our agricultural products are still moving along. I don't think that they've been impacted all that much yet. We may be hit by a fertilizer crunch like the rest of the world, but I don't think so, because I think we have ways of generating our own fertilizer building blocks from the Dead Sea, extracts from the Dead Sea like phosphates. The third segment of the economy, which is becoming larger now, is our defense industry. And that industry is just gangbusters. They're booming. They're seeing orders coming in for their product. Countries are ordering. They're seeing their, France banned us from their annual air show because I contend, I can't prove it. I contend because they were worried that Israel would take too many sales away from France, because the defense industry here, all the armaments that are being built and being deployed, I can't name the country because I was told this in confidence, but one of the Gulf countries are using missile interceptors manufactured here in Israel. Who would have ever guessed such a thing years ago? And so those industries are just, they can't find enough people, they can't expand quickly enough. And then there's the chemicals industry, which is, I think pretty much unaffected. We've had a couple hits on our infrastructure here in the chemical. There's a large chemicals manufacturing industrial park in the south outside of Beersheba. And I think it was yesterday, the day before, one of them got hit. The death cult in Tehran claimed that they hit one of our defense industries. What they hit was a pesticide plant. And people were worried that there were going to be toxic fumes in the air, but they tested and it wasn't a problem. And the fire's been put out now. I don't know if that factory's been restored to normal yet or not, but my guess is if it hasn't, it's a matter of days. And then yesterday, the death cult is using a lot of missiles now with these cluster ammunitions, which are forbidden by the UN, but no one seems to care. So each missile would contain maybe anywhere between 30 to 60 individual explosives that get dispersed over an area that maybe is as large as, let me try to put it in miles, maybe as large as like 8 to 10 mile radius. Okay. And those are hitting the country. And yesterday, one went off near Haifa, and we have our major oil refinery outside of Haifa, and one of its tanks got hit, setting off actually a rather small fire. But the refinery announced that there's no impact on its output or its operations, and the fire's been put out in a day. So, my guess is there's some repairs that need to be done, but it doesn't seem to have impacted the economy. So I think that's in a summary. What's getting hurt the most and is serious are the small businesses. People who have a falafel shop on the corner, or the people with small grocery stores on the corner, which is a popular thing here more than the United States. We do have supermarkets like you find on the West Coast at Safeway or Kroger's. I'm not sure what other chains there are in the United States. We do have a few chains like that, but a lot of people do their shopping at the corner grocery store. It's very popular here because, the cars aren't as popular. It's more difficult to drive here than it is in the United States. And those places are doing a fine business because people, shop there. But it's really those like small retailers, who have a clothing shop or a falafel stand, and they're getting hurt. Yeah. They're getting hurt.
It is amazing that the economy is as strong as you described. It almost seems contradictory because people are home with kids, they can't go to work, and yet even maybe they're in different parts of the country that are not as risky, but the fact that this number of industries that require real people to build real things continue to
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I want to just go back to something else before I forget. Just in terms of the resilience of the Israeli people and the support for the war. So I heard on a news show, a woman in Tel Aviv, which is one of the hardest hit places, and she has moved her family into the bomb shelter. They don't even bother going back into their apartment because they have so many missiles coming at them. They just live down in the bomb shelter with their mattresses, and they'll go back and forth to their apartment. If they need to pick something up, they'll go back to their apartment to pick whatever they need and come back down. And this woman on the radio said, "And Bibi, we want you to know you keep this war going as long as it takes. We do not mind. We will stay in this shelter as long as we need to. Just finish this war."
Yeah, let's talk about that a second. Is that what is the current prognosis for ending the war? What do you think has to happen? Where do you see the control of the Straits of Hormuz going? And will Iran, who supposedly is, from our government, is saying they are actively negotiating something, so what do you see going on, and what do you think is, what's likely over the next, let's say, 2 to 4 weeks?
I spend most of the hours of my day online watching videos and reading and listening. I have my own theories. So from an Israeli perspective, given the comments from the Israeli Defense Forces, that if it were solely Israel's decision to make, which it's not at all, probably given another 2 weeks under the current pace of operations, the IDF would say, okay, we're done. Okay. And now let's figure out, how we get, to some kind of ceasefire, which may be not so easy to arrive at, by the way, because Iran is the number of missiles fired against Israel by the death cult. And I'm going to continue calling it a death cult because your listeners need to understand that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. It's not a government.
No.
These are people who believe that their Mahdi, the 12th Imam, who's hidden somewhere in the population, comes to life once again when they bring around the destruction and the conversion of all the infidels to Islam, and in the process destroy most of the world. Okay, so this is the people ruling a country that had their finger almost on an atomic bomb, okay, until the current operation changed that. So I think calling it a death cult is the perfect word for it. So we're seeing a constant pace, as Ephraim said, of anywhere between 5 to 11 missiles a daily, and it fluctuates from day. I think most of us expect a big uptick tomorrow because they know it's our holiday of Passover starting tomorrow evening, and they'd like nothing better than the room. It's a time when all the families in every Jewish home in this country, whether you're secular or ultra-Orthodox or anything in between, every single Jew in this country is going to be sitting down at a Seder meal with friends and family, everyone. And so they know they'd like nothing better than to disrupt this holiday for the population. So I would expect there to be an uptick tomorrow. In any case, that pace of missile firing has not changed much over the past 2 to 3 weeks. And despite a lot of efforts on the part of both the U.S. Air Force and the Naval, as well as the IDF. And I can explain why, but I might take longer than we have in this episode to explain why. So given all this, the IDF estimates that they're still about 2 weeks away from completing what their part of the operations. But that doesn't take into account what the U.S. has on its list of things it needs to get done. And so, but the president, I think, has been quite consistent, and he thinks they're quite close to wrapping this up. Based on his comments, I would expect, therefore, this to be 2 to 4 weeks. Now, what does it mean to wrap this up?
Yeah.
Despite all this talk that they need or they're desperate for a deal, I honestly don't know. We're dealing with total death cult fanatics, okay, who would be perfectly happy to have their entire population destroyed, killed for their vision of the world to take place. So I really don't know if there's what level of serious negotiations that are taking place. I really don't know. But there'll probably be some point when both the U.S. and Israel say, okay, we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, and we don't think there's any point in continuing this going forward. And so what happens? And I honestly don't know. I can make an educated guess. At some point, the two nations will say, okay, we're done. We're going to stop. We're going to stop for 24 hours. And if you stop too, then you guys can start working on rebuilding your country. But, if you launch one, maybe we'll ignore it. If you launch 5, we probably won't. And then we'll just start again until we try this again, until eventually there's a real ceasefire. I don't know how else this is going to end without some kind of negotiated settlement of some form or another. With the Strait of Hormuz, this is my view, okay, and my view based upon a lot of reading and listening to a lot of people talking and so on. I think, first of all, for Israel, we get nothing out of the Strait of Hormuz. So for Israel, in our own little selfish, world, we really don't care. We have allies now in the Gulf with Bahrain and the UAE. We know they're going to get hurt very hard by a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. So to help our allies, we'd like to see it open. But are we willing to risk our own lives and whatever to open it up? I don't know. Maybe. I doubt it. So, and I think that the United States has almost a similar position. I mean, the reality is the U.S. economy gets almost nothing in or out of the Strait of Hormuz. Again, the United States has some key allies who are definitely affected in a serious way about what happens there. But we don't rely on oil coming out of the Strait of Hormuz. Japan does, South Korea does, the Philippines do, India does, and then all of Europe does. Europe is getting some oil and natural gas from the United States, but it still depends on a lot of oil and other imports from the Gulf.
And China does
so
too, right?
I believe.
And China
Yeah, China's getting about most of its oil actually out of the Gulf, about 20, I think it gets like between the Gulf countries. By the way, that's an interesting conversation talking about China. Maybe we'll have a chance another day to talk about how this affects them and how. But I think the United States' view, if I were the United States, I'd say, the Strait of Hormuz problem, that's an international problem. That's a problem for the entire world. So you know what? We're part of the world. We'll help. We'll contribute. We have, naval forces in the area. We have aircraft in the area, and we'll contribute our fair share. But this is an international problem. So when the rest of you countries in the world decide you want to go fix this problem, we're here to help you. But this is your problem. We're here to help you, but this is your problem. I believe that's the attitude that President Trump is taking. And I believe, again, I don't talk to anyone in the U.S. administration, so I don't know. But I believe this is going to be their position. In the interim, Iran's going to be charging its, toll fee, which is outrageous. And they're going to be restricting what gets in and out. And at some point, the world's going to wake up and say, we're tired of paying this toll. You're violating, the UN charter that you're a part of. And because this is international waterways, and that's it. In the meantime, just so your listeners understand, Saudi Arabia is pumping 7 million barrels of oil a day across its territory to the Red Sea. And there are tankers who are sitting there and they're on their way there to load up. United Arab Emirates has a pipeline going from the Arabian Gulf to the Gulf of Oman, which is a free open sea that bypasses the Strait of Hormuz. Between these two pipelines, they can achieve 50% of the oil output that would normally go to the Strait of Hormuz. They can put through these two pipelines, okay? And they can bypass the Strait of Hormuz. In the future, what's being talked about, and it's just talk for the time being, is that to get the oil to Europe, a pipeline would get extended from the current pipeline in Saudi Arabia up through Jordan, and then either through Israel and to the Mediterranean coast, or there's one scenario also where it bypasses Israel, goes up through Syria and hits its port called the Latakia on the Mediterranean, and therefore the oil can get totally bypass the Strait of Hormuz. And I know that there have been also talks between Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. United Arab Emirates has two major ports outside of outside the restrictions of the Strait of Hormuz that face the Indian Ocean. And for the goods and services, or the goods that need to be imported to Saudi Arabia or United Arab Emirates, they can come through those two ports, again, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. It's not the most efficient way to get things into the market, but it can work. They can build a fast train from that port into Saudi Arabia and people get served. Now, who gets screwed out of this deal is Qatar right now, because they're the major source of natural gas. So they would need to worry about building a natural gas pipeline. And I don't know what they would do. But I can tell you, for me personally and most Israelis, we're not going to shed a tear for Qatar.
So if you take that approach, which sounds, most logical, will the Europe and even some of the Middle Eastern countries join in trying to open up the Straits of Hormuz in a way that helps them, or will they just keep delaying it and you're going to have to go through this?
I think what will happen is initially they'll be mad at the United States because they'll say, you guys started this war and we're the ones suffering the consequences of it, so you need to help us fix this. But ultimately, they will be putting pressure on France and UK and Germany and whoever. You've got to come help us fix this problem because you're major customers of ours. And unless you help us fix this problem, then everyone's going to suffer. So I think the pressure will, I don't think President Trump needs to apply any pressure. I think that's why he's taking the attitude he's taking. He's saying, this is your problem and we'll help you, but it's your problem. And you Gulf countries, you Europe and Japan and South Korea and the Philippines, you guys got to come together and fix this problem and we'll help. But I don't know. This is all hypothetical thinking on my part based upon what I read and what I listen to and watch. But as you said, it all makes sense.
Yeah, it'll probably become, as you raise it up, part of what we try to do is, what you raise up, we say, okay, let's watch, because it's going to go down a certain path, and you're proposing what that path could look like. And we'll say, okay, it's happening that path, or there's a whole different thing that happens, because we can't predict it.
I can tell you the thing I lose sleep over, and my biggest worry is loss of American lives.
Yeah.
I do not want to see more American troops coming back in body bags.
Yeah.
Okay. We've just suffered on the Israeli side. 4 more soldiers were just killed up in our north fighting Hezbollah. But, we understand what we're getting into. But I don't think the United States has much tolerance anymore for seeing soldiers casualties of war. And putting ground troops to try to rescue an international problem called the Strait of Hormuz, I don't know, as an American citizen, which I am, I'd say, it's not my problem. Why should I commit my sons and daughters who are fighting, on the ground in this area? Why should I risk their lives to save an international problem? We'll help, okay? But it's a world problem. That's how I view it.
Yeah, that's
okay.
Right.
And I think that's how most Americans should view it.
Yep. Well, thank you for sharing, both of you, and we're gonna, keep praying for you guys, and hope that Rabbi, you're able to entertain your kids. How, by the way, how old is Noah?
No, it's 13.
13. So has he had his bar mitzvah?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
cool.
last summer he had his bar mitzvah.
Yeah, he's you can tell he's a pretty bright boy. So it's fun to see that. So we're encouraging. Anyway, so thank you so much. We're going to be thinking about you, praying about the lifestyle you have to live, and we'll see. Let's see what happens here. Interesting take on it, which really is helpful, because America is focused on you got to get control of the strait, and what you're proposing is not really, and throw it over to the international community, and they decide what they're going to do. In the meantime, they're coming up with an alternative to not have to do it through there, so it won't be shut down completely. So it's interesting. Anyway,
we also will be praying for a very peaceful and blessed Pesach for all of you over there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let me pray right now, Denny. Yeah, we just do pray for that. As Eric said, everybody in Israel, regardless of really what their depth of religious conviction is, are going to be at Seder, and they're going to be celebrating together. So we just pray for the ability to finish that, to enjoy that, not to be disrupted, and may it just be this beautiful moment that they do have, and illustrate actually to we believers, Christian believers, how wonderful that Passover is. And so we thank you for that. Amen. All right, we'll see you guys, and
Thank you very much.
we will catch up.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by Living Waters Abide Ministries. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.